Welcome to this episode 22 of our presentation of Shabuah and Qatsyr harvest, which on our last program, we were focused on what was revealed in the Torah as Moshe was describing the various things that were pertinent to us to realize pursuant to these harvests. In this regard, I'd like to pick up where we left off in our last program of the YAHOWAH blog, and it was with the following statement. He grasped hold, this is speaking of Moshe, he grasped hold of the written communication regarding the covenant, and he read it out loud, offering an invitation to meet in a hearing for the family. Then they said everything to which to reveal the proper path to walk, to receive the benefits of the relationship that Yahweh has spoken, we have listened to, and we will act upon. Shemot names, Exodus 24:7. As we talked yesterday regarding this particular statement, this means that unlike what existed in Christianity or with Islam, where there was no book contemporaneous with the agents of that religion, and wouldn't be one for anywhere from 100 to 200 years thereafter. Moshe was writing this down as he went along. And in particular, at this point, he would have had the book of Bereshith, where the covenant is detailed in the narrative between Yahweh and Abraham. And so he was able to grasp hold of the written communication. And the reason that we can be comfortable and assured that what we are reading now is consistent with what Moshe wrote down some 3,400 years ago is that there are thousands of manuscripts, and many dating all the way back to the 3rd and 4th centuries BCE. Many, of course, were found in the caves above Qumran that verify that the text that we are sharing with you is as it was all of those many thousands of years ago. And that is the advantage of a written communication. Today, as we spoke, written and oral communication have about the same merit. There's advantages and disadvantages to each. But when you go back in time, the written form of communication was vastly more effective, particularly in maintaining the veracity of a message than was oral communication, which speaks to the inferiority of both Christianity and Islam. And even in the case of Judaism, they will pretend that they have an oral Torah that dates back to this time. While it is a myth, even if it were true, it would make the oral Torah vastly inferior to the written one. This written text is specific to the covenant, the Bereth family relationship. And that is why I've mentioned that at this point, that which would have been written down would have been Bereshith, the part that Yahweh dictated to Moshe, since it was well beyond his experience. And the principal theme of Bereshith is the covenant that Yahweh developed and communicated to Abraham and through him to us. When you think of the covenant, it is an invitation to be called out of the world to meet with God. And that is why this verb, kara, was used. He said he read it out loud, offering an invitation to meet, to be welcomed, proclaiming and announcing, reciting it. That's marvelous, of course, to find kara following bereth, because the covenant is the principal noun describing the family of God, and kara is the verb that takes us there. It also forms the basis of mikra, which are the invitations to be called out and meet, of Pesach, Matzah, Bakurim, Shabuah, Teruah, Kippurim, and Sukkah. It even goes on to say that this was heard by the family. And they said that everything which to reveal the proper path to receive the benefits of the relationship with Yahowah, and that he has spoken, we have listened to, and we will act upon. And that is the nature of the covenant relationship. There are 5 conditions, and we must know them and accept them to be part of the covenant family. There are 7 Moed Mikre that take us from the fractured world of man to the perfect family of God. We must know what they are, when they're celebrated, what they represent, and how to benefit from them if we wish to engage Yahowah in the relationship that he has provided to us. This then leads us to the following, which is a foreshadowing of the Zeroahs, the sacrificial lamb sacrifice, to fulfill the Torah promises. Moshe took some of the blood, and he sprinkled it before the family. He said, "Behold, the blood of the familial covenant relationship, the bereth, for which, for the benefit of this relationship, Yahowah has cut karat with you concerning all of these words." Shemot, names, Exodus 24:8. There are 2 places where blood is an essential part of the message and the symbolism during the Moed Mikre. The first, of course, is on Passover, when the blood of the Passover lamb was used to mark the doorway, the upright lintels, and the cross beam of the doorway to life, as a way of conveying that the family inside was protected by Pesach and was participating in the covenant. The second application of blood is of the Adamah Parah, which is the bloody red man, who is fruitful and productive, who serves as the red heifer in the sacrifice that is offered on Towrah, that being in our future, about 8.5 years from now. And then we also learn that on the Mikra of Kippurim, it is the blood of the bull, a goat as well, that is shed upon the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant of the Kipporeth. And so while blood is not specifically discussed in the last 2 Moed Mikre, when we read how they are fulfilled, we learn that a sprinkling of blood in particular is used to anoint the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant, so that Yisrael is prepared to approach Yahowah. And in this case, it is Yahowah approaching the children of Yisrael on Kippurim after they are cleansed and prepared to meet with God by the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah on Towrah. So that is what this is all symbolic of at this point. And he said, "Behold, the blood of the familial covenant relationship, which for the benefit of the relationship, Yahowah has cut with you concerning all of these words." The covenant, this family relationship, and bereth is based on be'eth, which is family and home, is cut. And cut is karat. It's like we cut a deal. It means that it is formed as an agreement between parties with stipulations and responsibilities, such that we're cut into this relationship. And in this regard, karat also helps explain the nature of the covenant's one symbol or sign, which is circumcision, which is a cutting away of the male foreskin. And so in this way, we see the various metaphors that Yahowah has chosen all come into fruition. And so these words that are conveyed in the written account of the Torah, in this case in Dabarim, in Barashith in the beginning, are all designed for us to have an appreciation of how we are cut into this covenant agreement and how the blood of the sacrificial lamb on Pesach in particular makes it possible initially, where we find the doorway to God's home and to life opened on Pesach, our guilt removed on Matzah, such that we become the firstborn children of Yahowah on Bikurim. And then following the Shabuah harvest at the beginning of the time of Yaakov's troubles, we find ourselves in a position where the mortal remnant of Yisrael in the end is prepared to meet Yahowah and the returning Messiah on Kippurim by the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah on Teruah. These are the words of Yahowah. Therefore, we know that the doorway to the covenant is Passover, and the lamb is offered so that we might live. And it is through those sacrifices that Yahowah has made it possible for us to enter his home. Throughout the Torah, we are reminded that the Bereth covenant is karat, cut with us. This symbolism is consistent with being separated from the world, being called out and set apart. It also echoes, as I have shared, the symbolism of circumcision. By way of the word, the children of Yisrael were now prepared, albeit only temporarily, to meet their Maker. So it was only after the Torah was written and recited and the covenant was explained and accepted that the elders were finally allowed to access Yahowah. And so, Moshe, Aaron means alternative. Moshe means one who draws out. Nadab, one who will encourage the willing, who volunteers, freely giving of themselves. And Abihu, he is my father. And the 70 from the elders of Israel ascended, and they saw the God of the Torah. Now you'll notice here that Moshe had gone up. We were told he went up by himself. The elders of Israel were sent off on an errand someplace else. They pursued their own interests while this was taking place, and Yahowah dictated Barishith to Moshe, and they celebrated Passover and the Moed Mikre thereafter. So all of the revelation took place between Yahowah and Moshe, and it was only after this and that they were prepared that the children of Israel went up for a visual inspection of where Yahowah had appeared to Moshe. So it is interesting to report that the names of the participants and the order they were presented tell us actually something about Yahowah, the one who draws out, the alternative to man's way, who brings enlightenment and free will, the one who voluntarily gives of himself. He is my Father. Lovely, isn't it, when we actually look at the meaning of the words and then represent them in the order they are presented in the Torah? Now, as I've stated, this time, the elders of Israel were allowed to see God, but there is no indication that he revealed anything to them. Before, in fact, he couldn't have, because we've just read through the entirety of Barishith, and they were now living Exodus names. So there wouldn't have been anything to reveal at this time, because from this point on, they were writing down what they heard and they experienced as they heard it and were experiencing it. So there is no indication that Yahowah revealed anything to them. Before Yahowah would convey another installment of his message, he would reduce the audience back down to a single individual. And since I know it, and now you know it, why do the rabbis lie about the origins of their Talmud when the evidence otherwise is so obvious? Consider the audacity to claim to be Torah observant, even Torah scholars, and not know what the Torah actually says. The passage goes on to reveal that this manifestation of God was corporeal. That is to say, he had hands and feet, and that he enjoyed a good meal. And in the process of doing this, Yahweh destroyed the religion that Maimonides, centuries later, would conceive, because the Rambam claimed God is incorporeal, incapable of assuming human form. That simply is not true. God, who created the universe and also life, is capable of creating any life form that he wishes. He has a nephesh soul. He has a ruach spirit. He can project either of them into any life form of his choosing. So if Yahweh wants to present himself as a handsome man to the children of Israel, he can do so. And the way that he projects himself into that individual is through his nephesh soul, his consciousness, which would mean that the mindset, the attitude, the aptitude of Yahweh is presented within that living being. And relatively easy for Yahweh to do so. Now, that does not mean that the entirety of Yahweh is in this form, but Yahweh's nephesh would be, and Yahweh's nephesh would represent him in this way. And by taking on a human form through the projection of his nephesh, very much like an avatar, then Yahweh is corporeal. Now, even in this situation, the vast preponderance, I don't even want to give a percentage, but it would be astronomical, of Yahweh remained in the seventh dimension. He is only projecting an aspect of his nature into this realm. And it says, and under his feet, regel, there seemed to be work, say, something made of bricks, tablets, and tiles, of precious stones similar to sapphires and lapis lazuli, and like the essence of the heavens relative to the brilliance and clarity, the brightness and the coloration, the splendor, if you will, and the majesty. Shemoth names, Exodus 24:10. So even with this word's eye view, sharing the experience, it would have been wonderful to have been there with them. It's also apparent that Yahweh has a favorite thing, light, and a preferred color, which would be blue, as we continue this presentation. But the good news is you will see that while God's presence was conveyed in human form, that form took the appearance of light. So it's kind of almost like a hologram now at this point, the way that he is projecting himself. It goes on to say, but he did not extend his hand to the leaders of the children of Israel, and yet they observed the Almighty, and they ate and drank. So this was Yahweh's way of making himself more approachable, such that while magnificent in his appearance, he took on a scale that was more comfortable with those who were approaching him, and he did something that makes people very comfortable in someone's presence. They broke bread, they had a drink, they ate a meal. And I recall not long ago wanting to know how long I might be in Shamaim following the Shavua harvest before being redeployed to finish this mission of calling God's people home. And while time would be relative here on earth, because the shorter the time on earth, the better, in Shamaim, time simply exists in the seventh dimension. In fact, even in the fullness of the fourth dimension, time simply is. So that a second here on earth could seem like a year or more in Shamaim. But one of the things that I specifically asked for is being suggested here, which is the idea to enjoy a meal together. I just think it would be marvelous. Now, I know as a spiritual being, the last thing you need to do is eat. But I think Yahowah enjoys taking on, if you will, the human form and enjoying doing things that make us comfortable. And when we first meet, my projection of Yahowah has a lot of human characteristics because he presents himself as our Father. And he doesn't ever try to intimidate us with a massiveness of his presence. And of course, a meal would just be a lovely way to enjoy our time together. And we know that meals are going to be a part of forevermore because Pesach, Matzah, Bakodim, Shabuah, Teruah, Kippurim, and Sukkah are going to be celebrated forever. And there are meals associated with these chag, which are festival feasts. Well, it is an indicting statement and yet consistent with God's approach to humankind. Yahowah isn't impressed with status, leadership positions, or resumes. Even among the elders of Israel, God did not offer his hand. Case closed on the preposterous notion that the Talmud was inspired. It is nothing other than the arrogant and confused mumblings of the kinds of men Yahowah had no interest in even touching. What is also telling is that while God would not have any contact with the most eminent of the Israelites, he still let them know that he existed. He wanted them to be aware of what they were forfeiting by going their own way. And as such, Judaism is premeditated and thus manslaughter. Or excuse me, I should say not manslaughter. It's premeditated and therefore it's murder when Jewish souls are squandered based upon the lies associated with the elders representing the rabbis and with them having a rival oral law to support their rabbinical religion as opposed to relying solely on Yahowah's Torah. And of course, with the rabbis, the victims are almost exclusively Jews. When it came time to reveal his Torah, Yahowah knew the one he could trust. Yahowah said to Moshe, "Under the auspices of free will, choose to come up to me on the mountain. Choose of your own volition to be here because I want to give you the tablets of stone along with the Torah." The Torah is the teaching, instruction, guidance, and direction. It is from the verb yara, source of teaching and instruction, and pouring out guidance and direction, including the terms and conditions of the relationship, ha-mitzvah. For the benefit of the relationship, I have written kathab to teach and guide them. Proof, positive, la, yara, him, to direct and instruct them. Yahowah is keen on defining important terms in their first use. So here, when we read Torah, used in the sense of the Torah, because God will use Torah just to speak of teaching and guidance. He, for example, reveals that he provided his teaching and guidance, his Torah, to Abraham, negating Paul's claims in Christianity. But in this case, Torah is a title. It's the title of the series of books. And now that it is being used as a title, it is important that God define this word for us. And he does, because he tells us that Torah is based on the verb yara, which means to teach, to guide, to direct, and to instruct. Now, he does list three different things here. And although those three things all include his Torah, there would be one summation of God's instructions, and only one. And that was the tablets of stone. And they are not the 10 commandments. There isn't a word for commandment actually in the Hebrew lexicon. And And even if there were, there is no Hebrew word for obey. So it would be hard to have a command when you don't have a word or even concept for obey. These two tablets are comprised of statements, words, dabar, and comprised of instructions. And so between the two, what we have is 3 statements and 7 instructions. 3 statements on the first tablet, 7 instructions on the second. And they are a succinct way of revealing what is most important for us to know. And in this, one of the things that you find is that that first tablet begins by saying, you will not exist with other gods. And it says that Yahweh is a liberator, therefore he cannot be a lord. He is the one who withdrew the children of Israel, liberated them from Mitzrayim, the crucibles of human oppression. And it also says in that first statement, I am Yahweh. And so he's not Jesus. He's not Allah. He's not Hashem. He is not Adonai, the Lord, my Lord. He is Yahweh. And the second goes on at great length. And what it says is, don't be religious. Don't do anything that is religious. Don't speak for religious gods. Don't spend any time around the images and shrines of religious gods. Don't associate with religion in any way. And then it even concludes by saying that fathers corrupt their sons to the 3rd and 4th generation. And what this means is that a religious father has a religious son. It's why Israel has been religious so very long and has forfeited the Bereth relationship because of their religiosity. And it concludes in that second statement by saying that those who receive the benefits of the covenant through the mitzvah, these informative instructions, are going to be numbered in the thousands. Thousands amongst billions is 1 in a million. And that is the consequence of religion, causing there to be so few, because religion is so popular. And of course, then as we go through the second tablets, it's a series of statements. All but one is written such that in the imperfect conjugation, it's actually, the instruction is don't make a habit of doing any of these things. One of them is written in the imperative mood, which is the one about the mother and father. And the imperative mood would convey second person volition. So it is saying, of your own free will, choose to value your mother and father. And in this particular case, the mother and father would be the mother and father of the very covenant that was described in the Torah up to this point in the book of Bereshith, which is the overall preponderance of what Moshe just conveyed. And of course, he used covenant twice in this narrative to give us a clue that, yes, it is the father and mother of the covenant that we should view as exceedingly important if we want to extend our lives. So we are now hearing that Yahweh said again to Moshe, under the auspices of free will, which is essentially, come back up this mountain, choose of your own volition. These are 2 statements again presented in the imperative under the auspices of free will. Come here, because I want to give you, Nathan, a gift of God is these tablets of stone. And the second thing is the Torah, which is the teaching, instruction, and guidance and direction of our God from the verb yara. including the terms and conditions of the relationship. I'm just so glad to see mitzvah listed separately here, because Yahweh has been speaking of the Bereth covenant, and it is the Bereth covenant that comes with 5 instructive conditions or terms pursuant to the relationship. And since Yahweh is delineating them, he is doing the same thing that I did 3,400 years later. I went through and many times and translating and analyzing every word that God exchanged with Abraham, and I was able to deduce that there were 5 specific conditions for Abraham to be considered having accepted the terms and conditions of the covenant, which he manifested to Yahweh on his journey to Mount Moriah with Ishak, his son, which was the dress rehearsal, by the way, for Passover 2,000 years thereafter, with Dod fulfilling that role, with him being Yahweh's beloved son. And so the mention of mitzvah brings our attention right back not only to the second statement, which is, it is the mitzvah, these terms and conditions of the covenant that provide Yahweh's favoritism and mercy, but they are the essence of the narrative that we find on the covenant in Bereshith, which is why Asher follows, which are for the benefit of the relationship, which Yahweh says, I have written to teach and guide them, la yara him. 3 times in a single statement, we find an affirmation that it is Yahweh's desire to provide his Torah guidance to us, and it is our choice to accept or reject it. Further, God wanted Moshe to choose to be with him. It is what God desires most, our companionship, especially when there is something important to be accomplished. This request also reveals something about God that very few people consider. He chose to be with one man, not 4, and not 74, and certainly not hundreds of thousands. Yahweh found his relationship with Moshe to be sufficient at this moment, although it and many more would come, or through it, many more would come to know him. There's something very intimate, revealing, and highly desirable about personal interactions that are lost in larger groups. We are less guarded, more open, and approachable in one-to-one conversations. Very seldom is there pretense. Moreover, the larger the group, the more likely it becomes that we will acquiesce to the crowd and become less personally accountable and responsible. The more men congregate, the worse they almost always become. And that is what happened with the 70 elders, and it explains why they were no longer welcome. You know, God created Adam. He was happy just with Adam. It was a one-to-one relationship, which God found to be quite fulfilling. Chahwa was added not for Yahweh's benefit, but for Adam's, not to make God's existence more enjoyable. Noach and his wife and his sons and their wives were worth saving, but it was Noach's uniqueness that drew God to him, and all the conversations were through Noach. The others were just beneficiaries. Yahweh reached out to a single man and woman, Abraham and Sarah, when initiating the covenant, and they grew to become a family. And with family, there would be more heartaches and joys, as frustrations were interlaced with opportunities. With the first union, there would be one son, Yishak, through whom Yahweh communicated. And while he would have 2 sons, one was discarded in favor of the other one. Dowd had 7 older brothers, but none of them mattered, not to God. He had many sons, but only one was inspired in this way. Only one would Yahweh say, he is my son. I am his father. He would even say of Dowd, he is the chosen one. There were 6 billion people on this planet when Yahweh asked me to expose and condemn Islam. There were nearly 7 billion when he asked me to convey the message recorded in his Torah and prophets to his people. And by the time he led me to understand and share the role his son Dowd played in fulfilling the Moed Mikre, there were 8 billion. And through all of that time, there is still only one Basar, one Choder, one Nakri, one Yada. And yet, there are thousands of beneficiaries. Clearly, Yahweh loves many people, but both men and women. He has cultivated thousands of wonderful and productive relationships. And there are many more to be developed over time. But on the whole, the lesson is clear. Yahweh is not only content with fewer people in his presence, he actually prefers it. In my wife's parlance, she would say that God might be an INTP, and that he is a bit introverted, which means that God's preference is to be around a very small group of people with whom he trusts, whose intellect and companionship he enjoys, and that it is actually draining on God to be around many. And maybe one of the reasons why it is so few that become covenant. Thousands amongst billions is 1 in a million. God finds one-on-one communication more stimulating than he does the group dynamic. And I think that's largely because of what I was able to deduce about group dynamics and human beings. When we study the history of humankind and civilizations, it is that of war, slavery, of subjugation, of oppression. It is almost always one king by whatever name, ruling over, oppressing, and controlling to their detriment hundreds, thousands, millions. And the larger the empire, the larger the civilization, the larger the kingdom, the worse it became. There was none as bad as Rome. They were savage. The Roman Catholic Church became even worse as it tread upon the whole world. Large institutions are like gangs. They project the worst in human behavior. They're deadly. They're abusive. This is the nature of religions because they are popular. It's the nature of political schemes because they are also popular. And so collective man is almost always disagreeable. Why God didn't want the group. Individual men and women can be both good or bad, and Yahweh uses a filter to determine those that enter his presence. There is no filter for the group. There is no group entree into heaven. Now that is really something profound for us to contemplate. Now, one of the reasons this insight into God's nature is not well known is because man's view is the opposite. Religions are actually validated in the eyes of the constituents based upon their popularity. I'm constantly told, how can you be right and billions of Christians or billions of Muslims be wrong? Well, truth has always been held by the few, and lies are always embraced by the many. If you go back in human history, the most popular political and religious schemes are always wrong. So in reality, the larger the institution, the worse it becomes. Truth is not and never has been popular. This is especially valid today with political correctness and cancel culture, with progressives demanding that the truth be rejected so that their lies and deceptions can be accepted. In this case, as in most cases, Moshe was special. He knew all about religion and politics, and he had rejected these irritants. He had character, and he was brilliant and articulate. No one has ever been as resolute, steadfast, and devoted. It is also quite possible, and I think I misspoke probably a month or so ago, when I said that we don't have a direct statement from Yahweh that he had his Ruach come upon Moshe, as he said specifically regarding Dod. When he was 8 years old, as he was anointed, the Spirit of Yahweh came upon him and never left him. And as he said 7 times over, relative to the Towrah, the role that Yahweh has asked me to play, where the 7 spirits of Yahweh come upon this secondary branch. And we don't have a statement like that with Moshe, but there is a mention in the Torah of when Moshe gets a bit irritated with God. It's a part of the Torah that I'm translating right now, and so we'll dig into it in more detail, and it may be a bit presumptuous here. But the children of Israel were obnoxious, just absolutely obnoxious. They were abysmal throughout the entire Exodus. I use the term irascible, but that just doesn't come close to how horrible they were. And there is this presentation in Numbers 11, Bamidbar, Numbers 11, in the wilderness, where God says that they were essentially worthless. I can't wait to read this to you, because some of the word choices are amazing, because they're actually prophetic of our time. And he calls his people selfish and cantankerous. And they complain to Moshe, and their complaint is another thing that I want to share later, because there's a whole series of descriptors there with none of the words appearing anyplace else. So we can only guess as to what they claim that they liked better in Mitzrayim, but it wasn't cucumbers and onions and lots of fish, I can tell you that. And so they appear to be craving their own unique carve-out. They wanted to be on their own. And they wanted to be away from Moshe and from God. And in this, they say that they wanted a bashar, flesh, which is also the role that I've just described. It's a human herald that's speaking for Yahweh. They wanted to devour him. And Yahweh says in this rebellious moment from these ingrates that he had kept from genocide, and that he had freed from slavery, and was taken to a promised land. That they annoyed him to the point of kindling his righteous indignation. He was mad as hell at them. And it's written in the imperfect conjugation, which means his anger towards his people was ongoing. And he says it over and over again, how disappointed and disgusted he became with the children of Israel, which is, again, why he spoke through Moshe and not to the collective. And finally says, okay, they don't like the manna that I am providing. I'm going to give them so damn much meat, it's going to come out their nostrils, because I'm disgusted by them. But in this discussion, Moshe, even Moshe failed. And it saddens me in a bit because Moshe is the exemplar that I've put up here on a pillar. I don't do that with Dode. I realize that Dode's my king. I understand that Dode fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakudim, doing the most courageous act in all of human history, and that he is a brilliant mind and a great orator, and he is the leader of forevermore. But Dode's very real. His flaws are there for all of us to see, and it makes Dode approachable. Moshe was the man whose character always seemed sublime. But in this one case, Moshe fails. When the children of Israel were belly aching and complaining outside the doorway to his tent, rather than giving him an earful, which is what I would have done, I would have called them ingrates. Moshe instead complains to God and said, I just can't take it anymore. I didn't give birth to these people. I'm not the one who led them out of slavery in Mitzrayim. I cannot bear this responsibility. And how dare you do this to me? As a matter of fact, why don't you just do me the favor and kill me? That's what he said to Yahowah. And Yahowah didn't have any choice. Moshe was it. No one else could fulfill this role. And boy, did we ever learn that the hard way. His brother and sister were dunderheads. And so God offers a proposal to Moshe. And he says, all right, it's too much for you. I get it. It's too much for you. You can't. Even with my help, you can't stand up to this. So I'll back you with the 70 elders of Israel. Oh my. This is offered the same way, by the way, that Yahowah offered to provide so much quail, so much meat that it would come out of the belligerent children's nostrils. He says, okay, you don't want to do it alone? I'm doing it alone with you, but you don't want to do it alone with me? Work with them. See how that works out for you. I'll even share the spirit, the ruach that I placed upon you with them. I'll see how it works out for you. So there is this reference, and it's not overtly stated that Yahowah provided his ruach to Moshe, but there's certainly the inference that the ruach that was shared somehow among the 70. It also says that they prophesied for a moment, but whatever they prophesied about was so unimportant, it's not recorded, and that that didn't last very long. So it's just an interesting story in terms of trying to get to know Moshe better. And maybe, just maybe, the story is told like the story of Abraham pimping out Sarah for sheep, and of Dode sending off his probably the best man in Israel on a battle that didn't need to be fought, so that if he were killed, he would be able to take his wife. Maybe we're told these stories because it makes the people that Yahowah chose to walk through or talk through and work through more approachable, so that we're not going to put the Dodes or the Moshes on a pedestal. We know their flaws. We know their heartaches. We know their disappointments. And Moshe was the one that had stood out to say, boy, everything that Moshe did until the very end where he struck the crag as opposed to speaking to it seemed to be on the straight and narrow. Well, to some extent. I was always bothered by the fact that Moshe never overtly stood up to the children of Israel. When they grumbled, rather than bowing his back and throwing it right back in their face, which is what I would have done, he typically runs to Yahowah and does a face plant, falls flat on his nose, and it just not manly. So anyway, I thought I would share that with you because Moshe plays such an important role here. He is a man of great character, but even as a man of great character, he had his moments. So, yes, Moshe was special. He did know all about religion and politics, and it is true that he was chosen because he had not only rejected these things as irritants, as immoral, he had left Mitzrayim, Egypt. And he clearly displayed character when, prior to leaving, he stood up against the Egyptian establishment that was trying to work the children of Israel to death. And as we study Dabarim, if it is more than just Yahowah speaking through him mouth to mouth, then indeed Moshe was brilliant and he was articulate. And he appears throughout most of this to be resolute, steadfast, and devoted. Now, there were things that Yahowah wanted to provide to us through Moshe. The Luach ha-Eben, the tablets of stone. Ha-Torah, the teaching and guidance. And ha-Mitzvah, the instructive terms of the relationship agreement. Of these, the elite have abridged, mistranslated the first. They have replaced the second. And of course, they have ignored the third. Fortunately, you and I now have access to all three. Our interest in them and acceptance of them will determine whether or not we will enjoy private moments with Yahowah, as did Moshe, or not. The only short book in the entire Yada Yahowah series of, I think it's 36 that I have written, 34 on the shelf now that are offered freely, is written in stone. It is because Yahowah intended for the two tablets to serve as the abstract to his dissertation. The three statements on the first tablet explain the nature of Yahowah's desired relationship with humankind. The 7 instructions on the second tablet guide us toward that result. It is the only attempt that God ever made to summarize any aspect of his Torah guidance. The Hebrew word Torah defines its purpose. It serves as an instruction manual for human existence, including, as it should, our Creator's prescriptions for living. In it, we discover God's guidance so that we have access to the proper directions to get the most out of life. The Torah conveys Yahowah's teaching, through which we come to understand what God is offering and what he expects in return. Torah is from To, which is a signed, written, and enduring. Torah, way of treating people. Tur, giving us the means to explore, to seek, to find, and to choose. Yara, the verbal source of the word, which is the place from which instruction, teaching, guidance, and direction flow. Which Tob provides answers and facilitates our restoration and return, even our response and reply to that which is Tob, good, pleasing, joyful, beneficial, favorable, healing, and right, and that which causes us to be loved and to become acceptable and to endure. Torah, purifying and cleansing us. Tor, so as to provide us with an opportunity to change our thinking, attitude, and direction. That is the etymological basis of Torah. The Torah is the reservoir of human potential. It is the only way out of this life alive. There is nothing in the etymological nature of Torah that would cause an informed and rational individual to miscast God's guidance and teaching as law. Obedience to a set of laws is an incredulous religious edifice. In fact, the Hebrew lexicon does not include a word that can be accurately translated as obey. And when you see it in a Bible, it is the result of misrepresenting shamar, to listen. Actually, shama is to listen. Shamar is to observe. The third gift on Yahweh's list was his ha-mitzvah, the instructive terms of the relationship agreement. These are the 5 conditions of the covenant. They provide the means to accomplish what is required, to become a member of God's family. Mitzvah is a compound of my, which is an interrogatory, which encourages us to ask the who, the what, the where, when, and why, even how questions regarding the YAHOWAH, the terms and conditions, the requirements and prescriptions, indeed instructions and authorized statements regarding the expectations of a relationship. The conditions we are asked to meet, should we want to benefit from the covenant, are: we must distance ourselves from the Babel of man, particularly religious and political corruptions. 2, we must trust and rely upon Yahweh rather than on human institutions. 3, we must walk to Yahweh along the path he has provided and allow him to perfect us. 4, we should closely examine and carefully consider these mitzvah, these instructive conditions of the covenant relationship. And 5, we are asked to circumcise our sons while equipping them to be cut into the bereth by attending the mikveh. These mitzvah instructive terms lead to the asher, the benefits of the relationship agreement. And by accepting them, we are assured of being on the right path to get the most out of life. Now, that is a lot to derive from a single statement, but there is more. Yahweh concluded this listing of gifts he was bestowing by affirming that the Torah was, in fact, predicated upon the verb yara, to guide and direct, to teach and instruct. Recognizing the source and the subject, the Torah becomes the most enlightening and empowering, enhancing and enriching book in the universe. It is the ultimate expression of Shabuah. Well, I thank you for listening to this episode of the YAHOWAH blog. I am your host, Craig Winn, and I appreciate you allowing me to share this time with you.